Hello, welcome to the presentation on the poem Africa by David DIOP. A short introduction about the poet. David Mandesi Diop is a West African poet who wrote in French. He was closely associated with the Negritude movement, and his works reflect his anti-colonial stance. His works project his deep-seated anger at the yoke of slavery that was imposed on Africa. He believed that only political freedom can truly liberate Africa. A brief overview of the poem. The poet laments on the state of the African continent. He praises Africa for withstanding all the torture inflicted by the colonizers. Africa here is visualized as the mother, and the poet wants the readers to empathize with the plight of his motherland. Let's now move on to a detailed analysis of the poem. The first line of the poem is a cry for his motherland. The poet begins by saying, "Africa, my Africa." Africa is personified as the suffering mother. The poet's agony and devastating pain are evident in the way he repeats Africa twice. And when you look at the word "my," that is suggestive of the poet's possession of his motherland. Africa of proud warriors and ancestral savannas, Africa of whom my grandmother sings on the banks of the distant river. The poet is reflecting on the pre-colonial glory of Africa. When he says of proud warriors, that line is indicative of the proud warriors from the various clans and tribes. The colonizers took away their pride and dignity. The once proud warriors are shorn of their self-esteem and have now become slaves at the hands of the colonizers. And when he says, "My grandmother sings," he is referring to the rich oral tradition of Africa. The poet suggests that the pre-colonial past of Africa, rich in its oral folklore, is lost forever. He is mourning a long-lost tradition that should be reclaimed. And the line "on the banks of the distant river" indicates a forgotten past that has been claimed by the annals of time. I have never known you, but your blood flows in my veins, your beautiful black blood that irrigates the fields. Diop grew up in France and never had the chance to experience Africa during his formative years, and that is why he says, "I have never known you." But then the poet says, "Your blood flows in my veins." He asserts his identity as an African. Africa is his spiritual homeland, and this line is a proud assertion of his affinity for Africa and its people. Africa lives in his soul, and she cannot be erased from his identity. And then he says, "Your beautiful black blood that irrigates the fields." Diop hails the beauty of the color black and also comments on how the black's blood had been spilled so as to irrigate the fields of the colonizers. The blacks were held as slaves in their own land, and the colonizers alienated them on the basis of color. The white colonizer viewed the black native as ugly and dirty and denigrated his or her individuality. Diop is here fighting against this ingrained racial prejudice. The blood of your sweat, the sweat of your work, the work of your slavery. These lines speak of the hard work put in by the African people, and it is this that paved way for the prosperity of the colonial powers. The natives' blood and sweat cemented the success of the colonial enterprise. In spite of all their toil, the natives remain forgotten and ignored. Diop points out that the natives' existence has been erased by the white man's histories. Africa, tell me, Africa, is this your back that is unbent? This back that never breaks under the weight of humiliation, this back trembling with red scars, and saying no to the whip under the midday sun. The image of Mother Africa is carried on in this stanza. She's a slave who is physically and economically abused. Her back is unbent despite centuries of physical abuse and emotional trauma. The colonizer has been trying to break her will, and the image you have here is of a woman who refuses to be bent by years of servitude. Despite these years of unspeakable suffering, Africa is still standing. She refuses to admit defeat and proudly says that my spirit cannot be vanquished. She has been weighed down by years of misery, and yet she refuses to admit defeat. The mother's back is broken by the whiplashes of the colonizer's cruelty. The red scars speak of the brutality unleashed by the colonial powers. They narrate the tortures that have bled out the continent. But the suffering has not broken her spirit or will. She will defy these shackles of slavery, and the whip under the midday sun can assault her, but she will not break. She will endure. The poet has the strong conviction that his mother will not bow down before the colonizers and that she will emerge victorious. But a grave voice answers me. Impetuous child, that tree, young and strong, that tree over there, splendidly alone amidst white and faded flowers. So, what is this grave voice? Is it the voice of wisdom, or is it the conscience of the poet? Is it the spirit of the mother consoling him? And when the poet talks about that tree, young and strong, that tree over there, he is referring to Africa as the metaphysical tree of life which renews itself. The poem here asserts the idea of regeneration. The new generation of Africa, full of vigor and vitality, will help her renew herself. Africa's spirit that had been hacked by the colonial powers will be rejuvenated with the help of her children. And then the poet also mentions the white and faded flowers. What are those? They are the faded flowers of the parasitic plant of colonialism. The white color is here seen as faded, devoid of life. And you can see this as a subversion of the white-black binary. Earlier, white was seen as something that is inherently good. The white is the supreme race. And here the poet defies that idea. He doesn't see white as something that should be extolled. This is your Africa springing up anew, springing up patiently, obstinately, whose fruit bit by bit acquires the bitter taste of liberty. These are the concluding lines of the poem. The poet says that Africa will emerge strong amidst the tumult of colonialism. Life will again surge through her veins, and she will stubbornly glue her way out of the burdens of the past. However, this tree's fruit will be bitter, as liberty can be attained only through sacrifice and bloodshed. And that's all for now. Thank you.